past few Sundays, we've been talking about the preacher and his search for life, his search for meaning. What is our purpose here in life? He saw that everything is vanity. Everything is nothing new there's nothing new under the sun. Find that, the question, what profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? Key phrase is under the sun. The profit is, what profit is there in life when viewed from an earthly perspective? What value is there in our labor when we fail to consider God's will in our life? You've seen the answer given by the preacher. All is vanity. We try to see life in our humanistic point of view, in our personal point of view, and what Solomon said, what the preacher said is, all is vanity. Taking out God in our everyday decision making, all is vanity. How did he reach this conclusion? Based upon his personal experience. He built a lot of things. He acquired a lot of things, even with the knowledge that he had from God. He trying to understand what is life, what is going on in his life. He found out that all is vanity, from his own personal observations. Watching how people live, how people decide what to do. Our previous lessons examined the experiences of the preacher, how we begin to note his observation, in which he also shares his wisdom of living under the sun. His conclusion that life under the sun was vanity was partly reached by observing the inexplicable purpose of God. All things serve God's divine purpose. To everything there was a season, a time for every purpose under the sun. We can see that in verses 1 to 8 of our text today. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Whatever God does, it shall be forever. Everything here is that in I believe 2 Sundays ago when we talked about how he saw that everything is just cyclical. Like someone, from the sunrise to the sunset, from the wind going from north to south, from the life of a person, from being a baby to being an adult and dying. Everything there was a season and time for every purpose under the sun. Yet man is unable to find out God's purpose. God has put it in man to search out his purpose. In verses 9 to 11 of our text, what profit hath he that worketh in that wherein he laboureth? I have seen the travail which God had given to the sons of men to be exercised in it. He had made everything beautiful in his time. Also, he had set the world in their heart so that no man can find out the work that God maketh from the beginning to the end. All these labors, this efforts, and still man cannot find the purpose that God has given them. But no one can find out the work that God has done. We can see it in verse 11. It's because God has made sure that we can't find out his purpose. Why God acts his way. God does it that man should fear before him. In verse 14, I know that whatsoever God doeth, it shall be forever. Nothing can be put to it, nor anything taken from it. And God doeth that man should fear before him. To revere God and therefore seek to please him. In Acts chapter 17, verses 26 to 27, Acts chapter 17, verses 26 to 27, and had made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell. That they should seek the Lord, verse 26, and had made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and had determined the times before appointed, and the bounds of their habitation, that they should seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him, and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. He's doing this in order for us to seek him, in order for us to ask God for wisdom, to seek him more and more, to be closer to him. God has made man an inquisitive creature. He has also made life such that we are always seeking for something better or for some purpose. Hopefully we will keep seeking until we find him. We saw that when the preacher sought what the purpose is, whatever something better is, we always want nowadays we want the newest technology, the newest car, the newest whatever the newest trend is going on. We wanted the newest games. Hopefully we will keep seeking until we find God. The preacher's conclusion: there was nothing better than to rejoice and do good. In chapter 3, verse 12, I know that there is no good in them, but for a man to rejoice and to do good in his life. Eat, drink, and enjoy the good of all his labor. Yet the ability to do so is the gift of God. So one must be in favor with God, knowing that God will require an account of our actions. In verse 15, that which had been is now, and that which is to be had already been, and God requireth that which is past. In verse 11, in chapter 11 and verse 9 of Ecclesiastes, rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine heart, and in the sight of thine eyes. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. In chapter 12 and verse 14, where God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. The preacher is encouraging us to enjoy the fruits of our labor. It is a gift of God. But in order for us to enjoy that, we must put God, knowing that God will require the account of our actions. Without revelation, we cannot discern God's purposes. Without his blessing, we cannot enjoy the good of our labor. Therefore, any effort to live without God can only be vanity, as we will find his purpose inexplicable. The preacher's conclusion about the vanity of life was also reinforced by observing the injustice and oppression of men. When the preacher saw the wickedness in the place of justice, and moreover saw under the sun the place of judgment, that wickedness was there. In the place of righteousness, that iniquity was there, in chapter 3, verse 16 of Ecclesiastes. Power on the side of the oppressor with no comfort for the oppressed. Now, if we move to chapter 4, let's read chapter 4, verses 1 to 16. So I returned and considered all the oppression that are done under the sun, and behold, the tears of such as were oppressed, and they had no comforter. On the side of their oppressors, there was power, but they had no comforter. Wherefore I praise the dead, which are already dead, more than the living, which are yet alive. Yet better is he than both they which had not yet been, who had not seen the evil work that is done under the sun. Again, I consider all the travail and every right work, that for this a man is envy of his neighbor. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. The fool folded his hand together and eateth his own flesh. Where there is a handful with quietness, then both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit. Then I returned and I saw vanity under the sun. There is one alone. There is not a second. Yet he had neither child nor brother. Yet is there no end of all his labor. Neither is his eye satisfied with riches. Neither saith he, for whom do I labor and bereave my soul of good? This is also vanity. Yea, it is sore travail. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him that is alone when he falleth, for he had not another to help him up. Again, if two lie together, then they have heat. And how can one have How can one be warm alone? If one prevail against him, two shall withstand him, and the threefold cord is not quickly broken. There is a poor and a wise child, that an old and foolish king, who will no more be admonished. For out of prison he cometh to reign, whereas also he that is born in his kingdom becometh poor. I consider all the living which walk under the sun, with the second child that shall stand up in his stead. There is no end of all the people, even of all that have been before them. They also that come after shall not rejoice in him. Surely this is also vanity, vexation of spirit. Power on the side of the oppressor with no comfort for the oppressed. We can see it in verse 1 of chapter 4. And those who had never lived, like the dead didn't have to see, those that didn't even get to see the light of day. It prompted the preacher to feel like they're better than us that have seen evil. They're better than us that are seeking the purpose in life, the purpose, what our purpose here in this earth without Christ, without God. But the preacher reasoned in his heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked. Everything that we do in this earth will be judged. God will somehow use injustice and wickedness in carrying out his purpose. Just as God used Assyria and Babylon to discipline Israel. God allows injustice to test the sons of man. In verses 18 to 21 of our text, I said in my heart, concerning the estate of the sons of man, that God might manifest them, that they might see that they themselves are beasts. For that which befalleth the sons of man befalleth beasts. Even one thing befalleth them, as one dieth, so dieth the other. Yea, they have all one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast, for all is vanity. Concerning all go into one place, all are of the dust, and all turn to dust. Do know what the spirit of man that goeth upward, and the spirit of the beast that goeth downward to the earth. You can see here that the preacher is showing us that we're not better than the beast, the animals that lives here. We all live, we all die, we all go back to dust. Well, they are different. Well, to help them see that they are like beasts, in that they will die and their bodies return to dust, while they are also different from beasts, and their spirit returns to God who gave it. What the preacher concluded, once again, the value of rejoicing in one's own works. For this is what God allots him. Now what may happen on earth after he is gone. Verse 20, wherefore I perceive that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his own works, for that is his portion. For who shall bring him to see what shall be after him? In the remaining part of this section, we find the preacher making various comments which may be summarized as following. The vanity of skillful and selfish work. It can breed envy into others. We can see that, and he saw how the skillful work causes one to be envied by his neighbor. In verse 4 of chapter 4, again I considered all travail and every right work, that for this man is envied of his neighbor. This is also vanity and vexation of the spirit. While it is foolish to fold one's hand and to do nothing, acquiring too much is not worth the effort, for it really does not satisfy. Verse 5 to 6, the fool folded his hands together and eateth his own flesh. Better is a handful with quietness than both the hands with full travail and vexation of spirits. What is best is to have little with quietness and contentment. In Proverbs chapter 15, verses 16 to 17, Proverbs chapter 15, verses 16 to 17. Excuse me. Better is little with fear of the Lord than great treasures and trouble therewith. Better is the dinner of herbs where love is than a stalled ox and hatred therewith. You can see here that whatever our efforts without quietness and contentment, it will not satisfy us. It is not acquiring everything. I mean, Solomon acquired a lot of things. He had gardens, houses, lands, from 300 plus wives and 700 concubines. He had kingdom. He had the most prolific kingdom at that time. Everybody knew him. But he said, what is best is to have little with quietness and contentment. Especially if one is all alone. The preacher saw one with no companion, neither son nor brother. We can see that in chapter 4 that we just read. Who is never satisfied. Indeed, he can't be. And doesn't think for whom he is laboring. It is much better to have friends who can help each other in their labor, who can help each other when they fall, who can help each other withstand forces of opposition. It is difficult to be alone. It's not easy to be by yourself, to go through all these waves of attacks to you, whatever it is, from difficulties in life, from emotional being alone. That definitely has what's the word I'm looking for? Trigger to help to turn into depression. Like, it's hard to get through that. It is much better to have friends who can help us in everything, in our labor, when they fall, to withstand other forces of opposition. And popularity is such a fleeting thing. It is better to a poor and wise youth than an old foolish king. For despite rising from poverty, and prison to become king, the people will eventually prefer another much younger than he. We saw that in chapter 4, verses 14 to 16. Like, it didn't really matter where you come from or how good you are. At some point, they will seek someone better, someone younger. Preacher's observation about vanity of life, along with the wisdom of living under the sun, will continue in succeeding chapters. What we have seen in the study, why he reached his conclusion about the vanity of life, the explicable purposes of God, the injustice and oppression of man, the vanity of skillful and selfish toil, what wisdom he offers for living under the sun. It is best to rejoice, do good, and enjoy the good of one's labor, realizing that such is a gift of God. It is a gift of God to those who please him. To appreciate the value of friends who can help us in time of work and need. As Christians today, we may be perplexed at times concerning the workings of God, but we have assurance that all things work together for good for them who love God and are called according to his purpose. Romans chapter 8, verse 28. We have the family of God to help us in our labor and in time of need. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 11. Verse 11. Wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as also ye do. And of course, there is no greater friend than the God who is the ultimate and all God's and of ultimate end of all God's purpose in this world, Jesus Christ. Ephesians chapter 1, verses 9 to 10. Chapter 1, verses 9 to 10. Having made known unto us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure, which he had purposed in himself, that in the dispensation and the fullness of times he might gather together in one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth, even in him. Through him we can obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of our need. We see through our own trying to find a purpose of life in our own and within ourselves, within our own efforts, within our own labor. We will, the preacher said all is vanity. We will always seek something better than what we just acquired. That all of these is just for naught. It is a cyclical type of life where, you know, from death to life, from sunrise to sunset. But it is through contentment, the quietness and contentment with Christ, knowing that it is everything that we acquire, everything that we eat, everything good in our life is the gift of God. Adding God in that equation, adding God, knowing that God gave all of these to us, gives us, we will find our contentment. He is the ultimate purpose of our life. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for this wonderful day we've given to us. We thank you for giving us this message. Pray that we have received the blessing you have in store for us. I pray that we may apply this in our everyday lives. May we continue to seek you more and more in our everyday lives. Again, Lord, as we go to home, may you guide us and protect us. We thank you, Lord, for everyone that are here. Pray that continue to bless us and use us for the great gospel. We might call the glory and all the praise in Christ's most precious name we pray.